John chapter 11. The last time we were here, we ended with, Jesus going to beyond the Jordan, on the other side of the Jordan. So that's where he's at this point. And that is to the east of Jerusalem is where that would be. Let's see, I think I got a map here. If y'all can see that, whoops. Here's Jerusalem here. He would have been over here somewhere. Okay, on the other side of the Jordan. Here's the Jordan going down through here, and he would be over here somewhere. And at the time, can y'all see that? Mm-hmm. Here, and he'd be over here. At the time, that was still controlled by Israel. Okay, now would have been controlled by the country of Jordan. Is where he would have been at. Okay, but verse 1 starts off and it says that a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Okay, so there were three siblings that lived here. They're Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Okay, and they all lived in this town of Bethany. They were, siblings. They, they wasn't, any husband and wife there. They were just siblings. And it mentions that Mary anointed Jesus with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair. We hadn't heard about that yet. John actually records that in chapter 12. But you understand that when he wrote this gospel, he wrote it from the future, I guess you could say, of this time. So he was looking back, and to kind of distinguish this Mary from his mother Mary and Mary Magdalene, he made this point, even though he hasn't covered it yet, that this was the one that's going to anoint Jesus, with oil and wipe his feet with her hair. He used it in past tense because he was looking back when he wrote it. Okay. But we won't cover that until chapter 12. But this is who she is, and it says that their brother Lazarus was sick. And verse 3 says, "Therefore the sisters sent to Jesus, saying, Lord, behold, him who you love is sick." That's what they sent. Him who you love is sick. Now this sounds kind of like a cryptic message. Because you would think, well, why wouldn't you just say Lazarus is sick, but they said him who you love. And there's many theories of why this could happen. If you think back to the reason why he went to this area beyond the Jordan was, he was talking to the Pharisees in the previous chapter about, him being the shepherd, knowing his sheep, basically calling them out for not knowing who he is. And then they wanted to seize and stone him, so he left. Well, Bethany is really just outside of Jerusalem, about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. And so, maybe they knew that the Jews was looking for him, and being so close to Jerusalem, it would be easy for them to get to Bethany. If they would have intercepted the message, then they would know exactly whose house Jesus would be going to. If they said, Lazarus was sick or whatever. So maybe they were doing that. We don't know for sure, but it does sound kind of like a real cryptic message to say the man whom you love is sick. And so Jesus at this point was about 2 days away from Bethany. That's where this place is that he was at. He's about 2 days away. So when they sent this message, it would have took 2 days for the message to even get to Jesus. Okay? And so in verse 4, it says, when Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." And, Jesus was there, but Jesus wasn't going to just hang low, so he was probably there teaching, healing people, doing the ministry that God sent him to do. And, he wasn't hanging low. He just wasn't doing it around Jerusalem. He was doing it out abroad. And But, when they got the letter and everything, it may seem strange that Jesus just says, this sickness isn't unto death. I mean, that's kind of an odd statement. And, but then we find out later that Lazarus dies. Jesus says it's not unto death, but Lazarus dies. So as humans, well, what would you think? Here you are, he's saying that, he's the Son of God, and you're believing that, he is the Christ, and then he says this is not unto death, and then you learn that Lazarus dies. To me, human nature, you might start doubting. Well, maybe this ain't who we think he is,
I would think he'd change his mind, like we all do.
Yeah, but, to Jesus, death is, it's, he even calls it sleep here in just a minute. But, Jesus, death is nothing. But to us, death is permanent. And Jesus said, Lazarus' death will be for the glory of God, that the Son may be glorified through it. And so, he says it's not unto death that, God's going to be glorified, and so will the Son. And so, to me, like I said, it could be that, doubt to me would set in. And, if I was following somebody and he said, it's not unto death, and I find out that he died, I may be doubting if this man is who he says he is, Even though I've seen all this stuff, still one little slip up, because you're always looking for that one little slip up. And so there's, human nature would be like, well, maybe he slipped up on this part, But verse.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Where it says this sickness is not unto death, is that like maybe he's saying that he knows he's going to go and bring Lazarus?
Yeah, he knew he
back?
was. Yeah, Jesus knew that.
Then it's just.
Yeah.
It's not unto death.
Right.
And God's going to get the glory for
Exactly.
Lazarus coming back.
And that, this is what I was talking about, being the difference between Jesus and human thought. Jesus is like, no, it's not unto death, because I know I'm going to raise him from the dead.
Yeah.
But our human nature says the man died, that's permanent, that's final.
That's our,
so
that's our thought.
there's where the,
Gotcha.
Jesus knew what he was going to do the whole time, because he said, God's going to receive the glory. And what more glory can God receive than this dead man is going to be raised from the dead,
But if you just read that,
Yeah.
if you're just reading through your Bible, read that, you think, what?
Yeah. Right, exactly. Exactly. And so, who Jesus, these disciples feel they know who Jesus was. And so he gets this letter and he says that. And then verse 5 says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days where he was at. And, so there again, like, well, if you know he's sick, why are you staying 2 days, 2 extra days, But then after that 2 days, he said, let's go to Judea now. So I'm sure when he stayed those 2 more days, he was still preaching and teaching and healing people there. And while his friend is sick and
he's going on with his business.
Yeah, he's going on about his business.
I think it was really that. Oh, I'm sorry, Sam. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I just think that he wanted him to be really dead.
Yeah.
So it'd be a really good miracle. There would be no question of his deadness.
Yeah, and that's probably true.
Mm-hmm.
And but it says Jesus loved them. So we know he loved them, but he stayed. And but once again, human thought be like, why? Why are you staying? And it'd be hard to understand as in our finite human mind. But Isaiah 55:8-9 says this about God: for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, saith the Lord. For the heaven is higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. we can't understand the mind of God, just like they can't understand the mind of Jesus, because I mean, Jesus knew what he was going to do before he even got the letter. I mean, he knew this, and so that he knew what he was going to do. And then after those 2 days, he finally said, "Okay, well, let's go to Judea." That's where Bethany's at. And the disciples said, in verse 8, the disciples said to him, "Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and you are going there again?" Questioning him. And Jesus said, "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks in the day, does he not stumble? Because he sees the light of this world? But if anyone walks at night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." Now, what Jesus is saying here, that we talked about in verse 9, he's like, I must do the work of my Father. As long as I'm here, it's day. The light of the world is in this world. I have to continue to do the work of my Father. And God, part of that work is God said, go to Bethany, And so Jesus was going regardless of what, the rest of the Jewish leaders wanted to do. He's going because he knew there was a certain time that he was to die, and this was not it. And so, he was not going to die until it was time for him to die. So he wasn't scared. I mean, he wasn't afraid. God said go, he's going. And so that's that's the way it is. And as long as he's in this world, we have the light of the world. And he said there's going to come a time when it's dark, and that was when Jesus returned to heaven. And but until that time, he's got to do the will of the Father. And verse 11 says, and these things he said after he said that they were going to Judea, and said this about Lot. He said, "Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up." Now, if someone told me that somebody's asleep and I'm gonna go wake them up, okay, they're just taking a nap, and so his disciples rightly said in verse 12, "Well, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well. He feels good to sleep, he's going to get well." And however, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking of just taking a rest and sleep. So Jesus had to plainly put it, Lazarus is dead, And he says, "And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, but that you may believe. Nonetheless, let us go to him." And then Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us go, that we may die with him." For when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb for 4 days. So when Jesus arrived in Bethany, I always thought that was funny about Thomas.
Is he the doubting one?
He's the doubting one, because that's where we get the term doubting Thomas. And he's like, okay, well, let's go with him and die with him, But, so I was kind of doing the math here. When he got there, Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. So he stayed in Bethany 2 days, stayed in where he was at 2 extra days. And then took him 2 days to get to Bethany. He was already in the grave for 4 days. So he was already dead by the time he got the letter to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus knew that, but no one else did. So why was this hurry? I mean, he knew he was dead as soon as he got the letter. So staying 2 extra days wasn't going to matter.
He's going to be good dead.
Yeah. And so,
Stinketh.
yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. But, Jesus is being higher than us. He already knew Lazarus was dead. So rushing to him wouldn't have mattered. But, in our finite minds, we'd be like, well, why is he tarrying? Why is he waiting? And, but Jesus already knew he was dead. So, if somebody, like I said, somebody just told me that I may wake him up, but Jesus meant this, or Jesus meant when he said that, I'm going to go raise him from the dead. But his disciples didn't understand that. But he said, I'm doing it so that you may believe. Because even all this stuff, he knew that they were still doubting. Thomas right here is talking about, well, we're going to go and die with him. So that's part of doubt, and we'll find out the doubt of Mary and Martha here in a minute and things like that. But what would you think if someone told you, well, Lazarus is dead, but I'm going to go wake him up anyway? That would be something to be like, what? Because, once again, to us, death is final. I mean, we don't come back from death, especially when we've been dead 4 days.
Well, nobody ever has before this time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so...
Because rigor mortis sets in about 6 hours, 5 to 6 hours. And so that, quite a bit longer than that.
And during this point, I mean, they're out in the heat of the desert, 4 days. There's already decomposition's already starting to happen for sure. They're not put in the freezer, So
It wasn't a cave.
Yeah.
I wondered
Or
if that
tomb.
made any.
I don't know.
I don't know.
But he was bound, so
Yeah.
who knows?
I mean, they probably put spices and stuff on him.
Yeah, some kind of an
Yeah.
embalming process.
Mummification type of
Yeah.
thing.
But I mean, decay's already started to set in during that time. I mean, even though he's in the cave, you still got the cave's probably not that far in to cool off too much. Got the heat of the sun on it. I mean.
I mean, you leave, a piece of chicken breast out on the counter in a climate controlled place for 4 days, it's gonna stink it.
Yeah, it will. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So it's probably not a pleasant thing, but we find out that, like I said, that Lazarus already been in the tomb for 4 days when Jesus finally showed up. And so verse 18 says, now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Mary and Martha to comfort them concerning their brother. Now, during this day and age, there were what they called professional mourners. When someone died, people, their job was to go and weep and wail and mourn and all that outside the tomb or in the house for the whole funeral experience. That was what their job was. And
Funeral, or morticians
Yeah.
or whatever they're called. These were criers.
Yeah, professional criers. They went and you could hear them weeping and wailing and all that for however long. I don't know exactly how long they did it, but for however long, and they would follow the
Funeral procession.
Yeah, funeral procession. Here it's just we just know about Mary and Martha. We don't know if there's mother or fathers or anything. So they would follow the head around, just mourning and crying and weeping and all that kind of stuff. That's what their job was. And so to show you again this map, Jerusalem's here. Where you see that little dot right there, that's where Bethany's at. I mean, pretty close to Jerusalem, on the east side. Bethlehem is to the south. Bethany's to the east. Okay, so that's where he's at.
That's the reason why they were scared to go back, right?
Yeah. It's
So
actually
close.
straight east of the Mount of Olives. Just outside Jerusalem. But yeah, that's why they were scared to go back, because it was so close to Jerusalem. And some of these mourners, they may be plants from the Pharisees to go and inform them when Jesus got there or whatever. You never know. I mean, and here in a minute, you're gonna find out there actually was some there that reported what happened to the Pharisees. So we'll find that out here in a minute. Verse 20 says, now Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary was sitting in the house. So Martha went to meet Jesus when she heard he was coming. Mary stayed. And then Martha said to him, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give it to you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha said, I know that he will rise again in the last day, or he will be resurrected again in the last day. So she's looking to the last day when all will be resurrected, but Jesus was talking about here and now. Your brother's about to rise again. Now, it says, the question is it true that if Jesus had been there, Lazarus would not have died? Probably, but not necessarily. It depends on what the will of God is. I mean, to me, the will of God is for Lazarus to die when he did. And, Jesus could have healed him. Jesus had the power to heal anyone. He also had the power to just speak the word and he would have been healed. But Jesus uses that power at his prerogative. Some people he healed, some people he didn't. Because Jesus had the power to speak and everybody in that country would have been healed, but he didn't do that. So we don't know, the mind of Jesus. So we do know that evidently this was the will of God for Lazarus to die, so the Son would be glorified through the Father by raising him from the dead. But is that any different than today? Of course not. Some God chooses to heal, some God chooses not to heal. We don't know why he chooses to heal some and others he doesn't. It's not based on whether they're Christian or not, because sometimes he heals non-Christians and leaves the Christian to die in their sickness. Or sometimes he heals the Christian, and we don't understand, but God has a purpose for everything he does. And so, sometimes he doesn't heal the Christian here on earth, but when they die, now they're healed because they're in his presence. So, it's no different than today. Some he chooses to heal, some he chooses not to heal. And we may not understand it, but I guess when we get to heaven, we will. Why God chose to do with the things that he chose to do, or not do the things that he chose not to do. Does Martha really recognize Jesus' deity at this point? Not yet. Because, to recognize Jesus' deity is to say that he is God. But her reply was, you ask, or she goes, but even now I know that whatever you ask God, God will give it to you. So she's not recognizing that his deity yet. Okay? And they still call him teacher. Here she says the word Lord, but not Lord as in God. Okay? So she's, she's still recognizing him as teacher, but she knows he's close to God because she says, whatever you ask of God, he will grant you. But she hasn't recognized that he is deity yet.
Lord is typically, like in this day and age, it was a reference to respect.
Yeah.
Rather than deity.
Right. Kind of like the old feudal system in England. There were lords, there were, that type of thing. Yeah. Yeah. And she doesn't recognize that he has the power over death, because when he said he'll rise again, her thinking was the resurrection in the last day. So she wasn't thinking that he had power over death. Once they die, once again, that's final. And so, she's not recognizing that deity yet. But when she said that he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day, verse 25, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? Now, what Jesus is saying is, when he says, I am the resurrection and life, he could have said, I can affect resurrections and life. He could have said, I am in charge of the resurrection and life. But he uses the term, I am the resurrection and the life. And we've talked about this before. I am is what God called himself in the burning bush. I am that I am. So he's telling her, I am the one who is the resurrection. I am the one that is life. And so that is an astonishing statement. The other ones would have been, been like all statements, because none of us can control or be in charge of resurrections and lives. None of us can affect it. But he's saying, I am. And so, that's pretty, awe-inspiring statement here. And Martha does see a distinction between life and death, but she was lamenting over her brother, crossing over into death, but she still can't see Jesus being able to raise anybody from the dead yet. She doesn't understand that. And but then he also has the power to not only raise someone from the dead, because he says, though he may be dead, he shall live. Okay, that's saying I can raise them, but he also can grant everlasting life, because he said, whoever lives and believes in me will never die. So he even has the power of eternal life, and he's all this statement says all this, and it's just, once again, it goes over their heads, and but finally she said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming to the world." Now, this statement that she said back to him wasn't really the answer to his question, because he says, "I'm the resurrection and the life, and believe in me will even though he dies and live," and all that. Then he says, "Do you believe this?" Her statement is simply, "I believe you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming to the world." It's not, "Yeah, I believe you are the resurrection and the life." So she's not really answering his question. She just answered basically the churchy answer, I guess you could say. "Yeah, you are the Christ, the Son of God." Okay, and then it says in verse 28, "And when she said these things, she went away secretly." And so she didn't even give Jesus a chance to even respond to what she just said. She made that statement and then turned around and went to Mary. And she went to Mary, and she said, and here's where it says where that they still don't see the deity. "The teacher has come and is calling for you." They're still calling him teacher. And now Jesus hadn't come into town; he was still out. But Mary arose quickly when she heard that and went straight to where he was at. Okay, Jesus didn't come into town; he stayed outside of town, and Mary went to see him. And verse 31 says, "And then the Jews who were with her," these are the ones who were mourning with her in the house. Okay, not the leaders, but the ones who were mourning. The Jews were with her in the house and comforting her. When they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, 'She is going to the tomb to weep there.'" So they just assumed that she was going to go and weep before the tomb. And so once again, Martha did not wait for Jesus to respond to her statement. She just made her statement, turned and left. And said she secretly, we don't know why she secretly did it. Maybe she, was being respectful and went in there and whispered in her ear, Mary's ear, "Hey, teachers out here want to speak to you." Or
maybe it was the mourners.
Yeah, mourners. Maybe she was afraid that someone would go tell the Pharisees. We don't really know, but we do know that she secretly told Mary that Jesus was out there. And Jesus remained outside of town because, the tomb would have been outside of town. They wouldn't have buried somebody inside of town. They would have buried them outside. So it would have been a little bit of detour for Jesus to come into town, then turn around and go back to the tomb. Because, his goal was to go to the tomb. So it would have been, kind of, like it, say, the cemetery over there, by Oklahoma Stonewire. If that was our destination, we decided to go over by the Sonic first and then come back. What would be the point? Okay, if our destination is to meet up at the grave, that type of thing, it'd have been out of the way. And then verse 32 says, "Then when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.' Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And he said, 'Where have you laid him?' And they said to him, 'Come and see.'" Now, is it a coincidence that Mary and Martha both had the same statement when they came to Jesus? Because both of them said, "Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died." Or you think they might have been complaining that he wasn't there and talking, you know, because they knew he had the power to heal and he wasn't there. And so therefore they basically had the same statement to him when they saw him. I mean, that's a possibility.
Well, if I know women, and I think I do, they were probably grumbling.
Yeah, probably.
Well, we told Jesus to get here, and he didn't come, and it's 4 days later. He's been dead.
Yep.
I mean, did he really love him? I don't know. Did he show up? No. Actions speak louder than words. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just going to be real honest with you what the women were saying.
Yeah. And they had 4 days of lamenting and probably even resenting the fact that Jesus never came.
And I can just imagine if I had somebody following me around mourning all the time, I would probably be in a pretty bad mood.
Yeah. That's probably true.
Just gonna tell you how it would be.
Yeah. So why do you think that Jesus groaned in the spirit? That's kind of a
Mine says, when Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him.
oh. Yeah, it says, and you know, mine says, you know, groaned in the spirit and was troubled. I mean, why do you think he was a deep anger? Or anybody have any thoughts?
In 35?
Do it, not yet. We're before that.
Oh,
33.
The
33.
end of 34. No, 33. Sorry, yeah, you're right. 33. Yeah, it says that when he saw her weeping and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. Her says that deep anger rose up. Why do you think that happened?
I think they wasn't thinking that could do anything about it. They weren't believing that he could.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm leaning too, is of all the things that he's done, even his closest friends are doubting. They don't believe him. And, you know, basically it'd be more like, what else can I do? You know, that, you know, I've done all these things. And then comes one of the, the shortest verses in the Bible. Verse 35 says, Jesus wept. And when everybody saw him weep, the Jews said, see how he loved him. Okay, and the Greek word here translated wept means to tear up in the eye or shed tears. By contrast, the Greek verb translated weeping means to wail. You know, you're wailing out loud, you know, that type of thing. And so Jesus was shedding tears. Everybody else was just wailing.
Losing it.
Yeah, losing it and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, some think that, Jesus was weeping because, you know, that everybody was sad, everybody was wailing and things like that. But he knew what he was about to do. He knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. So would he be sad for that people were crying over his death, knowing that here in a few moments there's going to be exceedingly joy because he's going to walk out of the tomb? I don't think he was weeping because of that. I think he was weeping because he knew their hearts, and their hearts didn't fully believe and trust in him. And of all the things that he's done, all the signs and wonders that he has given, they still can't grasp who he really is. And, Mary and Martha, he spent time with them and they still had doubts. His disciples still had doubts. And I just think, that it just overwhelmed him. Not overwhelmed him like we would think overwhelmed, but just emotionally, just so, it just, caused him to weep, because of that.
I think it's got to do with, if you look at it from Jesus's perspective, that why do we have death? Why do we have, why do we die on this earth? Because Adam and Eve initially weren't going to die until they sinned.
Yeah.
The reason why we have death and sickness and all of the depravity of the human nature is because of sin. And he was looking at all of these people in their sin, looking at the depravity of the human nature and saying, and just sad.
Yeah.
Because this is where we are. You know, this is where humans are. This is where they've brought themselves because of their sin.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
And that's where we are.
Without Jesus.
Okay, so we move on to verse 37. They see Jesus wept. They see the fact that he, they say that, oh, look how much he loved this man. But then they said this. And some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind, who have also have kept this man from dying? And then Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. And Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. Now, I always think of the King James Version that says, he stinketh. Yeah, he stinketh in the King James. You know, like we said, he's been there 4 days, and you had all this heat, and I mean, there's decay has already started, or decomposition has already started, and so there's probably was a great stench, and it's all been held in by this rock in front of the cave. You open that up, I mean, it's probably not a good sight to smell.
You think about a squirrel or a bird, and you throw it in the garbage can, and
right,
you can smell it.
Or meat that's spoiled, you throw in the trash can, and forget to take it out, and
just the packaging. If you don't take it out right away.
There's probably there was a stench. But then Jesus, in verse 40, Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was laying, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing here, I say this, that they may believe that you sent me. Now, this proved that Martha didn't believe that Jesus could raise Lazarus from the dead, because she protested when he said, move away the stone. And she was like, by this time there's a stench. He's been dead 4 days. I mean, she protested. And and Jesus said, did I not say that if you believe, you would see the glory of God? Okay, that big word, if. And, so that's a confirmation that she didn't believe. And so I think Jesus wept, like we were talking about, because he was spiritually saddened, of the unbelief of his friends and the people that he loved. There he was, he was fast approaching the cross, because this is right before the Passover, and then this next Passover is where he will be crucified. That's how close, it's toward the end of his time on earth, because this was right before that. And so he's fast approaching the cross, and even his close friends didn't fully believe in him. And I think spiritually he was saddened because of that.
It's toward the end of his mission.
Yeah.
He hasn't accomplished his...
Right. And such, do you think such unbelief would really drive God to tears? I really do. I mean, we're created in God's image, so our emotions, God has them too. And so I believe that, God sheds tears over the things that, that we do, that he's, he knows. He's like, I've told you, and you still don't believe, and just like a parent with their children. Yeah. Children does something that hurts them, we're saddened as much as they are, or probably more than they are. And so that's, the same way with God, I think. I think he's saddened by the things that we do, even, more so than we are sometimes. So, lack of faith, I believe, really brings a sadness out in God. And Jesus was the incarnation of God here on earth. So, and he showed it here that, he does get sad. And I don't think that's any different than today. I think, we bring sadness to God when we show lack of faith in things. because God's proved over and over and over that He's always going to be there for us. He's always going to provide for us. He's always going to meet the needs that we have. But our first instinct is to doubt. Our first instinct is a lack of faith in Him. And, I think it saddens God when we do that. And verse 43. Now when He said these things, He cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out bound, hand and foot, with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, loose him and let him go. Now, Jesus, He, resurrected Lazarus with just the command, Lazarus, come forth. A lot of people said, well, maybe Lazarus wasn't really dead. Maybe he just passed out and he regained consciousness while he was in the tomb. Well, if that was the case, he's been in this tomb 4 days without food and water. I mean, that's for one. But if I'm wrapped up and I come to, first thing I'm going to do is start ripping this stuff off of me. But he was still bound. So that right there shows that he wasn't alive in that tomb, because no one's going to lay there still wrapped. If they come to while they're in that tomb. I think the crowd's reaction is, the Bible doesn't say what the crowd's reaction was, but I would have been speechless. See a dead man walk out of a grave. I think, I would be awestruck and just, I couldn't say anything. I mean, I'd probably be standing there like, with my mouth open like, what? It just happened, But I'm sure, that, there was, shock and awe. I mean,
yeah.
You saw a dead man who's been in there 4 days just walk right out of that tomb. I mean.
Well, it's just like Tara said too. Jesus waiting that long to go. There wasn't any doubt the man was dead.
Yeah.
There wasn't any doubt what had happened.
Right.
It's kind of like when Brenda was having her seizures, and we prayed it went on for 6 months, and we prayed that they'd quit, and they didn't. We kept thinking, why are these not stopping?
Mm-hmm.
And then when she got so bad, and then when He healed her instantly from them like He did, there was no question that God did it.
Yeah.
If they'd have stopped when she first started having them, people would have said, well, they found the right medicine for
Yeah,
her, this
mm-hmm.
happened. But there wasn't any question when it happened like it did.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's kind of the same thing going on here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it gets to the point where now only God can get that glory. I mean,
yeah.
Man can't have it. Modern medicine can't have it. God gets it.
If Jesus would have came and healed him while he was still just sick, people would get sick and healed all the time.
Yeah.
They get better all the time, but.
Yeah, and the last time, or one time, I'm going to say the last one, but one time when He healed somebody, they said He healed by the devil. I mean,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So,
He
yeah,
was
exactly.
good and dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It was rigor mortis.
His rigor mortis. But, so, once again, Jesus said God's going to get glory and the Son, and His Son's going to receive glory, and that's the only one that could in this case. Because you can't deny it. I mean, a man was dead and now he's walking out. I mean, there's not going to be any, that didn't happen. Everybody, all the people were there, and it's close to Jerusalem.
And he's stinking.
He needs a shower. But, verse 45 says, then many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen these things that Jesus did believed in Him. Well, yeah, I think I would believe too. If I saw somebody raise Him from the dead. But some of them, this is what I was talking about earlier, some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things that Jesus did.
Spies.
Yeah, spies. They ran and told. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, what shall we do? For this man works many signs, and if we let him alone like this, everyone who will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away our place in the nation. The logical answer to the question, what shall we do? Well, if you saw this man raise somebody from the dead, I think I might want to listen to what the man has to say. all the sign, they even admit he works many signs, and now he just raised someone from the dead. I mean, they testify that he has done these things,
They didn't want to believe.
and they didn't want to believe.
Because it was about power for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do miracles guarantee belief? Apparently not. Because the Pharisees couldn't believe. Now some of them believed, but
Nicodemus.
yeah. So
Joseph of Arimathea.
they were saying that the Romans would come and take away our place in our nation. The Romans already took away their nation.
Yeah.
I mean, they had total control. The Romans do.
It was about power.
Yeah, it was all about their position. Exactly. They were afraid to lose their place atop the Jewish social, economic, and religious hierarchy. They were, afraid to lose that. And, so what blocked them? Same thing that blocks a lot of people today. The three, I call them the 3 P's: position, possessions, and passions. Those 3 things, you're going to have to give up when you surrender to God. Bobby kind of talked about that today. When you surrender, it's a total surrender. It's not partial. So your position doesn't matter. Social, professional status, it doesn't matter. You are now God's when you surrender. Your possessions, you get, that's why Jesus kept telling them, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. Now, it doesn't mean that when we come to him, we have to sell everything. It just means, if God says give money here, we give money here. If God says do this, we do that. Our possessions don't matter anymore. And then our passions, the things that we are most passionate about, need to switch from worldly things to now God. And he should be the sole passion in our lives, and let him dictate everything else. So you got to get rid of those, but that's what blocks people from accepting Jesus for who he is, even today.
Don't want to let go of those.
Yeah, don't want to let go. Verse 49, and one of them, Caiaphas, now Caiaphas was the high priest. It says, being high priest that year, said to them, but before I read that part, Romans appointed the high priest during this time. They could remove a high priest, put somebody else in their place. So, instead of God, because, God was, had to be a son of Aaron, and Romans just appointed whoever they wanted.
Political.
Yeah, political. They were more, yeah. And, but Caiaphas, who was the high priest, said, you know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and not that the whole nation should perish. Now this he did not say on his own authority, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for that nation only, but also that he would gather together in one the children of God who were scattered abroad. So, because Caiaphas was the high priest, his statement that he said was a prophecy. He didn't realize it at the time, but that's what it was. Now, does God have to use only godly people to prophesy? Of course not. There are many examples that God uses people that are not godly. Think Nebuchadnezzar, when he had the dream of the statue. And that statue was the nations who come to power throughout history after him. And then you had the Pharaoh back in Joseph's time, when he had the dream of the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. I mean, that was a prophecy. Balaam, I mean, he prophesied over the children of Israel, but God got a hold of him and said, you only can say what I tell you, but he wasn't a godly man. He wanted to do it for money. So, there are many examples where he would use ungodly people to prophesy without them even being aware of it. So that's what Caiaphas here, he's prophesying what Jesus was going to do. He was going to die for the nation and for the die for the people. It didn't just say nation, but for the people, so that the whole nation wouldn't perish. So and that's what Jesus did. And he didn't just die for the Jewish nation; he died for all of God's children. Those Gentiles and Jews alike. That's Jesus died for us all. And verse 53 says, then from that day on, they plotted to put him to death. Now, we already know that they already tried to kill Jesus multiple times. Or some of them had. Now this was the actual Sanhedrin, the whole council, because they called the council together. So now it wasn't just a few of them, it was the entire ruling council of Israel ready to kill Jesus. And so, because it says the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council. And then as a body, they decided to commit murder. Yeah. I mean, it'd be kind of like today, where, if the whole federal government, the Congress and the president get together and decide, okay, we got to kill this man.
Or you think about when we decided we were going to go after Bin Laden.
Yeah. Because everybody was in agreement that he had to die. I mean, yeah. And so relentlessly, America went after him. That's kind of why I hear it. The whole council said they're going to die, so relentlessly they're going after Jesus. Verse 54. Therefore, Jesus no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there into the country near the wilderness, a city called Ephraim, and there remained with his disciples. And the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went, this is about, roughly 6 months. I think it was 6 months. I'm sorry, 6 days, not months. I don't know why I said months. This is about 6 days before the Passover. Passover was near, and but he went to Ephraim, a country up to the north. Before the Passover, a lot of people come to the Passover to purify themselves. So verse 52 says, and the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went from the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. And they sought Jesus and spoke among themselves as they stood in the temple, what do you think, that he will not come to the feast? Now both the chief priests and the Pharisees had given a command that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it, that they might seize him. Now, so Jesus didn't walk openly among them like he did. Now he's up at Ephraim waiting until the Passover, because he knew that Passover was when he was going to die. So he was waiting, and when I say waiting, that just doesn't mean just let's hang out and kick back and relax. Jesus is still going to be Jesus. He's still going to be teaching and healing and that type of stuff, but he's just not doing it around Jerusalem. Yeah, so there are many reasons, there are 3 good reasons why he decided to raise Lazarus. We already know about about glorifying him, but there are 3 others. One, it converted many of the people who witnessed it. Many of the people who witnessed it believed him after that point. Second thing, it proved Jesus had power over life and death. And I think the third thing is he used it to provoke the Sanhedrin to set the trap to seize him so he can eventually go to the cross. Because that's the whole point, was to go to the cross. So from this point on, the whole Sanhedrin was now ready to seize him and put him to death. So he used this incident to provoke him. Okay, because he said several times, they don't take my life, I lay it down of my own accord. So he's the one that's provoking them to set that trap. So Jesus himself did that. Was he aware that raising him would provoke him? Of course. I mean, fully understood that, that the hardness of their heart, they couldn't accept who he was. So whatever, if he did something this miraculous, they're going to search him. And so he led them to set that trap, and he willingly walked into it. Or rode into it, because he rides into on a donkey here. But he literally goes here, and he knows what's going to happen. And
so how many days was the riding in of the donkey? Because we celebrate Palm Sunday a week before.
It was a week before the Passover.
So that's 7 days.
Yeah.
So he's already rode into
Well,
Jerusalem?
they consider the whole week Passover week. They have Passover Day, and then they have the Passover week, and they consider the whole thing the Passover week, getting ready for it and things like that. It may be a little bit longer than 6 days because chapter 12 starts off as now 6 days away from Passover. So it could be a little bit longer than
But
6 days
what I'm
where he's
saying
at.
is Palm Sunday, or when he rides into Jerusalem, is that 7 days before? Is it the same
Well, it's
as we
not really
celebrate
7
now?
days before. He was crucified on like a Thursday, not Friday time. And so he rode in on Sunday, and so it wouldn't have been a full 7 days before he was crucified. It'd been 7 days before he was resurrected. The Palm Sunday would be, because Easter is resurrection.
So Palm Sunday would be like 4 days.
Yeah. And now that ties to Leviticus anyway. Now that you asked, Leviticus says that, they select their sheep and they have to inspect it for 4 days before they slaughter it on Passover.
4 days. Yeah.
Jesus rode into Jerusalem, and from that point they questioned him in the temple and could not find any fault in him. That was them inspecting God's lamb for 4 days before they finally put him to death on Passover. But anyway, here's a map. That map, same map. Bethany's here. Ephraim's, kind of straight north up here. Y'all see that? Bethany's here. Ephraim's up here. So that's where Jesus went. And then we'll find out in chapter 12 next week that 6 days before the Passover, he comes back down to Bethany. So that's kind of where he's at there. And why did he go to Ephraim instead of Jerusalem? Because the timing still has to work out. He's got to wait till Passover. And so he's got to ride in on the donkey on 4 days before, just like Leviticus, commanded for the lamb and things like that. And that's where we're at. So we're going to stop there. That's the end of chapter 11.